Now you can go.
Okay, we'll start it again. Okay. Good evening. It's now 6 o'clock Central Standard Time. This is a regular meeting of the Champaign County Forest Preserve District Board of Commissioners. And may we have a roll call, please?
Livesey.
Yes.
Hayes.
Yes.
Goodman.
Yes.
Cairns is here and Harakovich is absent with notice.
Okay, great. Thank you, Andrew. So, and public comment, I see that we have at least one person on. Has anyone else signed up that we're aware of?
No others that I know of.
Okay, Mary Ann, I think I've been notified that you may wish to comment. And if you do, please go ahead.
Okay, I have a brief comment. First of all, I've been volunteering at the Forest Preserve for a few years, since around 2015, and I love it. I love everything about it, the education department, of course, all the preserves. But a thing that concerns me is our commitment to climate change. And I was wondering if the board was considering a climate change policy. I noticed on the website under plans and publications, the last thing I see is the environmental assessment report, which is from March of 2009. And then there's another thing that says what the CCFPD is doing to help the environment, and that's from 2008. And so my concern is, you know, is the board considering setting up a policy resolution, anything to address climate change?
All right. You know, as a partial response to this, Lori, would you mind addressing some aspect of this from the staff position?
Sure. Certainly we'll take a look at the website. We've done a lot since 2008 and 2009. It just has not been reflected there. So we'll take a look at that and make sure that the website is more current. In terms of a climate change policy, it's my understanding that the Sustainability Committee is working on a resolution to bring to the board, slated for next month so that it can be approved right before Earth Day, which would make a statement on the board and therefore the district's thoughts on climate change and the approaches that we're taking in a general way.
Okay, so it's going to be brought to a vote and voted on in April.
That is the intent, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you. That was my question.
Other board members care to respond at this point as well?
Just thank you. I appreciate the input and feedback. So I think it's something that we're all very keenly aware of.
Yeah, and I looked at the proposal that was brought forward in the Sustainability Committee. It's very nice and concise, ambitious, and I think it's kind of, if I remember, it talks about getting to climate neutrality by 2050, which sounds good to me. So yeah, I'll certainly look forward to seeing it, you know, in full as a proposal. I just want to say I appreciate the work of the Sustainability Committee, you know, on that. And if the other members haven't seen that annual report, it's like a 5-pager that the Sustainability Committee put together, I think completed in January. It's really awesome, very nicely done. Really cool looking pie charts about how we use energy, and I think Peter and Mike had a lot to do with that. And so, you know, yeah, my hat's off. I mean, that's a very nicely done and easy to read report that I think ought to circulate with the proposal.
So that could be the kind of thing that should be on the website, right, Lori? I mean, that's something that we could add on there.
Sure, it's not an approved board document, so I want to see where it fits in. But yeah, certainly I think that's something that we could show.
Great.
All right, Mary Ann, I'd just like to thank you for coming tonight and presenting these comments, and also thank you for your years of service for the Forest Preserve District. You're well known amongst the Forest Preserve District community, and thank you for your efforts here. So,
Thank
any
you.
other comments, staff or board? If not, thank you, Mary Ann. And let's move on. Are there any?
Bill, do we want to, John Hoekstra is also here. I don't know if he intended to speak or not, but let's
Oh.
give him a chance.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to add that, I'll be involved in working on the statement. I think there's still some lack of clarity on exactly what we're shooting for. So any input is appreciated, any, parameters that, would make a difference. I think all of us want to see the Preserve District participating, and we have been doing a lot, and the public doesn't know a lot of what it has been happening and should continue to happen. And so I think we just want to encapsulate that and create something that will add to the momentum, and also, make it clear to everybody who works with the preserves, everybody, funding agencies, everybody who works in the preserves, that this is a priority and this is a important goal for us collectively. So.
Okay, John, thank you for your comments. So, okay, any further comments or discussion? Hearing none, I would like to move on then. Any additional agenda modifications that we're aware of? No.
Bill, if I could just ask, I didn't get a response from everyone on my inquiry on whether or not we might have questions for Mark Hansen on the item that is really late on the agenda and is just a for your information item. So if we can
Sure, if you want
release
to
Mark,
elevate
if
that.
we,
Yeah, I had flagged that later, but sure, go ahead.
so does anyone envision needing to ask today anything on the assessment, the conservation assessment for collections? If not, then we can bid Mark a good night.
I have no comments or questions. Thank you.
Same here.
Scott?
I'm fine. I'm impressed by the whole thing, overwhelmed actually. Very nicely done and very informative.
Okay.
I mean, you're welcome to hang out, Mark, but if they don't have any questions, feel free to take your evening back.
Yeah, Andrew, you were good with it as well. Yeah, and I am as well too, Mark. So thank you for joining us, and I'm sure we'll have future discussion about it.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, well,
Thanks,
thank you
Mark.
very much for bringing it. Okay, moving on to the approval of consent agenda. Can we have a motion, please?
Move we approve this consent agenda items A through I, minutes of the special meeting on February 10th, 2022, minutes of the regular meeting on February 17th, 2022, minutes of the executive session on February 17th, 2022, the monthly staff reports and program budget first quarter report, the disbursements for approval, the February treasurer's report, the purchase of the mower for Middle Fork, the purchase of the utility vehicle for Middle Fork, and the second intergovernmental agreement between IDNR and CCFPD.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded their conversation. I know I have a couple of questions for John on this. So other questions?
Well, if it's on the consent bill, it should be taken off. It should have been taken off the consent if you have questions.
Okay, I won't make it a serious question, then I'll I'll
Okay.
withdraw the question and keep it there. I'll deal with that later on. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. Okay. All right.
Bill, as a point of reference, I don't remember in the past that we have listed capital equipment purchases under the consent agenda. Is it just me, or is that a new thing this month?
John, do you want to talk about that?
Well, I can.
Okay, Lori.
So we have been looking at the length of agendas and trying to put items that are relatively simple. And so in this case, these are all things that were budgeted. There's nothing strange in that regard. So we suggested that they were put on the consent agenda. If somebody wants to discuss anything, then perhaps we could jump back up to agenda modifications and you could pull them from the consent agenda, then they would be added to the new business and then you can discuss them as you should.
I
So it's
understand.
an efficiency matter.
Okay, but procedurally, this is a new thing. That was my original question. I don't recall that we've done this in the past. That's all.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's new this month. We've
Yeah, I was
generally been
thinking we
trying. to
had
do
one in
things.
the past, quite honestly, but I think Andrew's point is well taken.
Okay. I don't have any specific questions about this. I just to note that something is slightly different in this, which is good. I'm for efficiency. I know in the past there have been some questions sometimes with some of the major capital purchases, given the tricky nature if we have something that's not on a lowest bid kind of thing. So which again, I'm fine with. So I'm not trying to hold up the process, just trying to.
Yeah, Andrew, I looked at that in particular because I know we've had some questions in the past about the bid selection, and they all appear to be the lowest bid and also local vendors, which has been a concern of the board in the past. So I was pleased to see on both points.
Didn't I see one that's not a low bid purchase this time? Or am I? Because I thought there was one like that we had to take a vote to not accept the low bid because it didn't meet specs. Is that's still on the agenda, or was that part of the consent? Did we vote for that too just now?
No,
I can tell you which one it is in a minute.
Yeah, I don't remember. It was a truck or a vehicle or something.
It's
No, it was a mower.
a mower.
The mower is still on
Yeah.
the regular agenda. Okay, that's all.
okay, if no further comment. We do have a motion and a second to accept the approval of the consent agenda. Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Sorry, Bill, just who is the one that
Yeah.
seconded?
Scott,
Okay. All right. Livesey,
I just have one more clarification.
Okay.
If I could, sorry, not to prolong this, but with, I think in the past, like you said, if it was money, it seems like we always pulled them out of consent agenda. But I am, again, all with Andrew on this. If we can put it in consent, I'm good with that. But I just want to know, like, Lori, from your or from staff perspective, when you're putting together the agenda, like, are you just kind of making a judgment call on which might be more discussion worthy, or it used to be our clarifier was money or not money, but in this case, like, obviously the purchase of simulator went down into new business, but the mower rolled into consent. Just what is your judgment call on what will go where?
Thank you. So yes, it is a judgment call, and the board, of course, can easily pull things off of the consent agenda and talk about it. It's our thought, well, if it's budgeted, it's the low bid, it doesn't require moving money around from some other accounts, it's
Right.
Kind of pro forma, then we can go ahead and put it in the consent agenda. The simulator, for instance, not in the consent agenda, because I think it's part of a golf package that there's some other things that need to happen to make it work. So we want to be sure to clarify things.
Okay, that helps a lot. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think, Lori, it sure seems that if it's in the capital budget list or an equipment list that has previously been approved, and then the bids come in within that approved budgeted amount, that we should be safe to go forward. But I do worry about anything that doesn't go to a low bidder, to a low bidder, an obvious low bidder, and the other to someone, a vendor outside Champaign County. I think those issues are always worth discussing. But
Well, then with that, did you want to pull the mower from the consent agenda and discuss that later and vote on the consent agenda without item 2I? Because we were asking to reject the lowest bid.
And remind me, that rejection was because the lowest bidder did not qualify.
Let me get the exact reason.
It didn't meet specs.
Yeah.
Thank you.
didn't-
It did meet the specs. Okay. What's the board's sentiment on this?
I'm with you, Bill, it seems a little off to me if we're not, that one isn't as straightforward. So I'm going to amend my motion to remove consent agenda item. I have item G, purchase of mower for Middle Fork from consent agenda.
Yes, thank you.
Second, Andrew's amendment.
All right.
Okay, moved and seconded that we remove the item for the purchase of the mower for Middle Fork. Can we have a vote on that item, please?
So we're voting to remove it from the consent agenda.
Yes, correct.
Livesey,
Yes.
Hayes,
Yes.
Goodman,
Yes.
Aaron's is yes.
Okay. Thanks, Andrew, for raising that and approaching it that way. So we will move that to later in the meeting. I guess under the new business, so that'll fall under an additional item under new business. So. Okay, so for the remaining items, can we work on the original motion, or do we need a new motion to approve the modified list?
So Andrew, your last motion was to,
Just to remove that one item from the consent agenda.
The one item.
so that's like a sub vote from the overall vote. So I guess you still have the first move and second.
Yeah, I was hoping not, but that's kind of what
I mean, it seems a little strange. It would probably be cleaner to redo that just because it's a different consent
Okay,
agenda.
all right. All right, please, board, let's go ahead and readdress it that way.
All right, I move we approve the consent agenda items A through I, except G, the purchase of the mower from Middle Fork, as previously presented.
We have a
Second.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded to accept the modified consent agenda. Can we have a roll call vote for that motion, please?
Livesey,
Yes.
Hayes,
Yes.
Goodman,
Yes,
Terrence,
and
Yes.
the motion is approved. Okay, next item is our Forest Preserve Friends Foundation report.
Since you were there, Bill, did you plan to give it, or did you need me to give it, or was Sarah going to give it? We didn't
I found it
pregame.
really interesting, as a matter of fact, and I look forward to the board having, better communication and contact with the board. Now, I thought it was a really interesting meeting. It was clear they missed having Sarah there. But for my 2 cents as a commissioner, I found it very useful to hear the dialogue. More the interaction of the board, I think, was what I got out of it, was just their how they operate, because it's always been somewhat of a mystery to me. But yeah, thank you for the opportunity to join you. Anything you wish to report from that meeting, Lori?
Just to note that they did not have quorum, so they could not vote on anything. They held discussions on, probably the most notable thing is, as part of the endowment process, and in order to set up an endowment, we're undergoing a process to set up a strategic roadmap and a development plan. So that was the most substantive item that they discussed.
And on that, and I think maybe it'll come up later, but it is informative and helpful having that foundation report in our packet, in our board packet. So I appreciated you including that. Next item, Citizens Advisory Committee report. Scott, are you handling that?
Yeah, I'll handle that. I mean, I wasn't actually at the most recent meeting, but Lori was, and Lori gave me a little summary, which now, based on her summary, I'm disappointed I wasn't able to attend, because it sounds like a pretty interesting meeting. So again, we had some cross fertilization with Will Timmons from the foundation attending. and to talk about coordination. So this thing that I think we brought this up at the very last meeting or at the study session. So I'm really glad to see this stuff, really transpiring and taking place. So it's wonderful. I think that the CAC probably really appreciated, that level of involvement. So again, I'd welcome the other commissioners to attend our CAC meeting. It's 2 months out from now because we meet every other month. So March, April, May, I guess. And we're the first Wednesday in May, but I can share that. And also Sue Gallo attended and talked about volunteer attendance, or opportunities in the district, which is always welcome for all of the CAC members. So that was really great also. And then the other update is the Hazen Bridge Committee is kind of limping to a start, but is starting. So and we're getting things underway. I think Roger, that's near and dear to my heart, but I can't really lead it. So Roger is leading the committee, and I've shared the suggestions that the staff offered, and then we'll be meeting and seeing, which of those we're going to prioritize and how we're going to move forward. And I also want to say, man, our minutes from the last meeting were killer. I mean, from the January meeting. So if you notice that in the staff report, that was really nice. I mean, I don't even know which member was responsible for that, because we've had a lot of trouble in the secretary role, but it was a very thorough report. So I look forward to seeing more CAC minutes at that level of detail. So and I hope everybody appreciated it. I think it gave you a good sense of, how things go. And I'd certainly appreciated, again, this was an initiative, I think, that we suggested at that study session to get these minutes into the board packet. I think it's just fantastic. So I really appreciate that. I think that's it. Unless anybody have any questions for me.
No. Thank you, Scott. Yeah, I too appreciated seeing those minutes in our packet. So
Yeah, when are you signing up, Bill?
Yeah, we'll see.
Okay.
Okay, commissioners report. Sarah, do you want to kick us off?
Yes, it helps if I unmute. Yes. So I just, can everyone hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So my connection is really bad tonight. I wanted to say how excited I was to see, Lori, your report on reaching out to our representatives about the railroad crossing scenario, obviously, but and there were the others at the legislative update. So I just really thought that was great to see that. That was a focus I think we really wanted to look at this year. And then, just really glad to see that. I was glad to see the Forest Preserve participate in the Prairie State Conservation Coalition. And then on that same note, in the reports that some of the staff, it sounds like, participated in one of the Land Trust Alliance's kind of basics of land acquisition training. And I think that's so important that, if we're going to go about doing land acquisition, that we do it in alignment with best practices, and Land Trust Alliance is the place to be for that. They set the 12 standards and practices for how any organization should be acquiring land in a responsible and ethical manner. I just really think that's a great bandwagon to be jumping on. So I was really excited to see that. So those were some of the things. It was great to see some of the golf updates. And I've heard quite a bit, I think, from some of Sue's emails about having cleanup days and things like that. So sounds like that's getting some good traction as well. And then I also received the email about the Kickapoo Rail Trail kickoff on, I think, April 24th. So I'm glad to see that happening. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. Andrew?
Yeah, sure. I'll echo Sarah's first comment there on the legislative involvement. I think that's so important to have those kinds of connections and relationships. We've benefited from that in the past. So, Lori, that's great to see that that's continuing. I also think it's great to see Willow Pond. That feels like that we've been working on that one behind the scenes or talking about it for years, kind of like the rail trail. So it is nice to see that inching closer to completion. Same thing with the IDOT with KRT on the 2C bids going out. That's another one that just, I know there's one of the recent articles in the News Gazette was not as favorable about, maybe it was in Tom's mailbag about why we didn't have more done on that. And, I get some of the impatience for people wanting to see that move forward after a long time. And then the last major thing here, just great seeing all the volunteer opportunities and people that are contributing in the community, all the involvement with groups from campus and beyond, and then all the educational programs and the outreach that's happening. So I know that a lot of that stuff was put on pause during the pandemic, at least for the first year or two. And so it's great to see that stuff up and running. And very last comment, echo what folks said before. It's great to see the Friends Foundation and the CAC reports in the board report this month to just kind of see what they're up to. Thanks.
Hey, great. Thank you, Andrew. And Scott?
All right. Well, yeah, I mean, I had two comments from the packet. The one that I thought that you guys haven't mentioned yet, that one of my favorite things to see move forward is the project at the dam, or the spillway, I guess, at Lake of the Woods. It looks like there's an engineering study moving forward, so that'll be really great. Can't wait for that one all those orange fences to come down. So let me know when. And the other thing that is a little more bothersome there, I know we talked about disc golf. It might have been a meeting or two ago, but I just want to state for the record that I'm pretty freaking opposed to that. But I don't know about the rest of the commissioners, and we're not here to vote on it, but I just don't think, I mean, there's no part of Forest Preserve District that says disc golf to me. I don't really like setting aside our lands as exclusive areas for recreational opportunities. I mean, I know we have a golf course, and sometimes I do rent the little signs that say, you cannot pass this point because you're on the golf course. I'm like, it's a forest preserve. I want to go out there and have a picnic. So no, Joe, I'm not going to do that. But nonetheless, I mean, it's that kind of a thing, so I really don't think we need more territory. I mean, what, we can do ball fields or what? I mean, what athletic events, and a disc golf is a pretty decent size acreage. I mean, and I love disc golf. One of my best buddies was like a disc golf professional. This is nothing against the sport. But again, I just don't find, and again, I don't know what the sentiment of everybody else, but I just wanted to say that because it looked like you guys were moving like forward or something. So I didn't get that out of the, where the dialogue is going. But as far as this commissioner is concerned, I would say, it's a bad idea. I mean, it's not a bad idea. It's a cool idea, but not for us. Let somebody else do it, like the dog park. So anyway, just wanted to say that and clarify. And seems like there was, I just wanted to say, I've had a real good time at the Forest Reserve. My daughter went out to Buffalo Trace and tried to walk the log bridges, which I really like, and I really appreciate that. So I don't know where that came from or whose great idea that was. And if you haven't had a chance to experience the little log bridges over the creeks at Buffalo Trace, I mean, they're really cool. I mean, creative and interesting, and the walks to them, or the paths are narrow. I mean, they're really, I love seeing that kind of stuff. And like some elfin land. And I would request that we do something about all the mud on all the trails. So I don't know if that's something that, Peter can do, but, no, I'm kidding. but everywhere I've went lately, it's like just super mucky. I mean, I can't, Sangamon River and the lake just all around here, Lake of Heron View is just an absolute disaster in terms of muck. So anyway, no, that's the forest. So I appreciate that. It's what we do. But yeah, they'll dry out. Anyway, I'm kidding, but I appreciate all that we do. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Scott. I do have some comments that Bobby forwarded, and I want to be sure to get those on the record. First of all, that she wanted to acknowledge the GFOA award, and John and team, thank you very much for that strong effort there, continuing the 6th year in a row for that award. And so I think that's outstanding for the district to be recognized that way. Bobby was also quite excited about the spillway project too, Scott, so you weren't the
Okay.
only one, but yeah, no, she really had that at the top of her list. And I will add, I had it and she had it as well, just impressed with the continuing education efforts of the staff. I think throughout the report, we're seeing evidence of staff continuing to and trying to improve their understanding and training. It's a small thing. The Willapon, and Andrew mentioned that, but so glad to see Willapon effort moving forward. I was pleased to see a mention about cybersecurity, and I know it's been a conversation we've had as a board over the year or a couple of years, but I'm glad to see at least there are some concrete efforts moving forward just to make that assessment. Anxious to see what comes of that. And I think we've talked about the other things, and I just want to also acknowledge there are several references to collaborations across departments and collaborations among agencies, and that's been one thing I've been really wanting to propose as a commissioner, that we reach out to other organizations and that we're known as someone who's interested in partnering with other groups. And so I've seen evidence of that, some of them small, some major. So just keep up that. I think it's really good for the name of the Forest Preserve District to be seen as a partner in those kinds of events. So I think with that, Lori, it's your turn.
Admittedly, there was so much going on last week that I haven't prepared very many remarks, and you all touched on things that I was going to touch on. So maybe I'll just say I have no report.
All right, accepted this time. So understand. Yeah, you have had a busy period last month. Okay, any other old business that has surfaced that we need to discuss? If not, let's move into our new business.
And Bill, where did you want to put the mower?
Yeah, I just had it at the end after the housing policy, but I'm happy to move it up top. And just since we've
Could we move it up to save Bridget from having to?
Yeah, let's go ahead and talk about it first. So
Okay.
Who wants to present that?
I can give do you need to make a motion first before I?
Yeah, probably should. So, all right, can we have a motion to approve the purchase of the mower for Middle Fork?
Well, so Bill, I'm going to do this, but this is part of the rejection first, correct, Bridget? As part of this whole action request.
Yeah.
So I'm going to move that we first reject the lowest bid for $20,340.00. Then as part of the same motion, move to approve the bid for the purchase of a commercial mower for Middle Fork River Forest Preserve from AHW LLC for $25,369. Accept the base bid with trade-in deducted.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, and now discussion, commentary by staff.
So part of the reason that we're requesting the lowest bid in this case is the vendor submitted a substitution, which just doesn't quite meet the specifications of the bid. It can be especially difficult with really large equipment to get lots of bidders, because you either are submitting exactly what we're asking for, you're out of territory, or you're submitting a different piece of equipment from a different manufacturer. We always accept substitutions as required, but they just don't always meet the specifications that we requested. We also had an additional vendor who noted that they just can't even supply this type of equipment right now because of supply chain issues.
And that particular problem does not exist then with the successful bidder?
They haven't made any note that they have concerns with that supply. We have a contract end date in the bid We don't really have, liquidated damages written into our standard contracts for not being able to fulfill a bid. But if we started to get close to that contract point end date, and they were still having huge issues, we have options to deal with that contract and potentially rebid. But we've been relatively flexible with most vendors because almost all of them are having some issues with supply chain.
Okay. Any further discussion?
No, thanks, Bridget, for that background.
All right, if not, maybe we have a vote, please, to approve.
Livesey,
Yes.
Hayes,
Yes.
Goodman,
Yes,
Cairns is yes.
and the motion has been approved. Next item is the the purchase of the simulator.
I move the Board of Commissioners approve the purchase of a simulator in a box Birdie Plus package from Foresight Sports for the amount of $17,449.
Second,
Has been moved and seconded. Any discussion or commentary from staff? Okay, hearing none, maybe have a roll call vote, please.
Livesey,
Yes.
Hayes,
Yes.
Goodman,
Yes,
Cairns is yes.
okay, next item is the irrigation head replacement.
I move we approve the bid for the Lake of the Woods Golf Course Irrigation Head Replacement Project from Commercial Irrigation and Turf from East Peoria, Illinois for $87,500.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion.
Just a quick point of clarification on this. I know the replacing the irrigation system has been an ongoing issue and question over time. Seeing the way that this one was written, when it talks about replacing the irrigation heads, but doing all of them, what other lingering issues, I guess is my question, would there potentially be with older parts of the system? Because I know we've replaced a bunch of stuff. At one point, I think Bobby even made the joke that once you replace enough stuff, then you have a whole new system because you've replaced so many different parts. So is there a clear idea of sort of what other things that we would potentially have with this, which I know is a big question?
What I could say is that the only main thing that we probably might have to run into down in the future will be the lines, the piping lines, the underground lines that we have. But as far as replacing everything else that we have done so far, it's been very successful with the new pump station, the new satellite stations, and replacing the new irrigation heads. It's going to give us better water efficiency than we had from the old ones that we had. The old irrigation heads that we had were Rainbird's Impact irrigation heads, and then we always had a lot of constant problems with them. The obsolete parts and everything, so we're upgrading little by little. But in the long run, if anything was to ever come down, we basically completed a project on the irrigation system other than underground piping. So everything else will be completely replaced.
Wonderful. That's what I was looking for. Thanks, Joey.
Thank you.
Joy. And Joy, just the obvious question, there is no local vendor in Champaign County for the product, is that?
No, the commercial irrigation, well, for the product for the Hunter irrigation heads, they usually come from Site 1, which is out of Champaign. They supply the irrigation heads, and then commercial irrigation comes back from Bloomington, Peoria area. They're the contractors that come in and install them, and they'll get knocked out and everything for us. But if anything, any issues that we have in the problems on the road with any Hunter irrigation heads, then I could always purchase one locally, will be in Champaign, Illinois by Site 1 Landscapes.
Okay, all right.
I do feel like I should
Yeah.
point out, and maybe in reference to Andrew's comment as well, that this is a later iteration of the memo. So the project scope here is the front 9. So we will be coming back with additional irrigation head replacement in 2023 to complete the irrigation head replacement for the course.
So we basically, what we're doing is we're trying to break things down in phases rather than having a whole lump sum of money to replace all the irrigation heads. And it makes a lot more sense to give us a year break in installing what we're needing, the first 9 holes of on the golf course, and then work back with the back 9 hole. And hopefully the 3rd year phase will be the irrigation replacement heads on the par 3 greens.
Okay.
Joy,
Awesome.
just a quick question on the back 9. What the condition of the heads on back 9, are they operable? Do you have some idea of what percentage operation we're getting from them?
Yeah, so operation that we're getting off of them right now, I'll say about good of 85% of them. I have replaced some of them with new irrigation heads here and there at times, but there's still some of them that are still causing some issues for us at times. And we just have to, basically what I've been doing is been scrapping up parts that we had stored in the past in our maintenance shop, and replace little existing parts that we have, because now it's been obsolete, and it's really been hard to really actually find parts for those impact irrigation heads that we've been wanting.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Livesey,
Yes.
Hayes,
Yes.
Goodman,
Yes,
Cairns is yes.
motion is approved. Next item is Resolution 2022-06.
I move that we approve resolution 2022-06, amending the easement request policy and retitling it to the easement and license agreement request policy.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. There, this further discussion by staff or questions by commissioners?
I'd be happy to take questions if nothing's clear.
I'm glad that this,
Yeah, just do a little bit of a more explanation on this, because I was a little bit, I mean, just I'd like a little more information. What the license agreement idea applies to what type of things?
Okay, so unless, Sarah, did you have a related question? And then I'll.
No, that's good.
Okay. So yes, the current policy as it stands only deals with easements, and I think the assumption there was permanent easements. What we are suggesting is that license agreements could be included in the same policy. And for license agreements, basically that's use of the land. And it is my understanding that previously it has been recommended that we do license agreements instead of easements in a lot of cases because of why, again, Bridget or Mike, there's a reason I read in something. Bridget, help me.
Any land that we purchase, especially with IDNR funds, it's very difficult to, there's restrictions basically on easements for a variety of reasons, but we are allowed to use license agreements, and license agreements are typically written in a way that they're not assumed to be in perpetuity. So it just gives us a lot of flexibility too, in case it's not working out with whoever we're issuing the agreement with.
Thank you, Bridget. And then the policy.
I didn't know if this came up. Yeah, I was just gonna add if this came up because of the kayak licensing, because I know we sort of created that from the ground up. As I recall, I could be a little mistaken there, but I think we were saying, you know, we hadn't really licensed with that kind of a vendor before to use the property, and I didn't know if this came out as a result of that for one reason or another.
No, I mean this
Okay.
policy, when I suppose I should look at this to make sure that it's clear. This is more about the use of land. Like we have a lot of these, or a few of these at least, near the KRT. And the next item on the agenda is one of those. So yes, this policy adds license agreements. What it also does is clarifies costs that we would charge for easements, both permanent and temporary, and license agreements. Previously, we've been using an administrative document in order to assess costs for these items. What ends up happening is that they're all grouped together, and some of the costs are pretty astronomical. And you'll see in the next memo, there's reference to how much that periodic use would have cost the person that is we have an agreement with. So we were trying to find some costs that were more reasonable. Also, just to note, adding the temporary easements cost is in line with what IDOT was willing to pay us for the most recent temporary easement. So what it's trying to do in terms of the cost is recognize that we may want to look at some other things, how much the land is worth, impact on the land. But if we look at the administrative cost for processing these, we can be more consistent across the board. And so that we don't have different easements and license agreements with a broad range of prices, because it's really difficult as staff to negotiate these things if we have no idea what the board might end up wanting in the end, right? So it provides some consistency so that you don't have one neighbor that's having to pay $3,000 for something and another neighbor down the street paying $500 for something. So it would help equalize things.
Yeah, I mean, it does sound, I mean, as I was reading it, that's all I could think about, because all I remember voting on in terms of license agreement were those vendors, you know, at Homer Lake and at Sangamon River. And I was putting it in all that context and saying, wow, that's pretty severe for, you know, that kind of a agreement. But I mean, it does apply. Those are not different. I mean, this would apply to that on some level. I mean, that's still a license agreement because that's what we called it, right?
Is that true, Mike? Were the license agreements with the vendors? I don't recall.
Yeah, I don't know how that works. And whether this policy applies to that kind of a vendor agreement.
Yeah, I guess we were very much seeing them as, you know, a property license agreement versus a vendor license agreement.
Okay, so that's just a different class of thing.
And Scott, we inherited about 8 to 10 license agreements from CSX. That's where a lot of the inconsistency is down.
I see. I mean, it occurred to me because I know that we said, you know, how much do we charge for this when we're charging, again, going back to my kayak vendor. I mean, a similar issue is to say, you know, if we're going to issue into this one and we had another, I mean, of course, didn't have competing ones, but, you know, the same dynamics could start to apply. And to some extent, it is use of our property. And it does require staff to do some certain things, I think. Maybe. Anyway,
All right.
never mind. Just let's go on. I'm clear.
Yeah, let's bring this to a vote. Any further questions then? Okay, maybe we have a roll call vote, please.
Livesey. Can you say that again, Sarah?
Yes.
Hayes.
Yes.
Yes.
Goodman.
Yes.
Cairns is yes.
Okay, motion is approved. The next item on the agenda, resolution 2022-07 KRT license agreement.
I move that we approve a license agreement with Mr. Eugene O'Neill to utilize land north of the Kickapoo Rail Trail seasonally to access farm fields, contingent upon review and approval by council.
Second.
Has been moved in second. Discussion or explanation?
One question on this. I know this came up in the past. I believe one of the concerns was, you know, the seasonal use and what the impacts would be on that stretch of land. I think been brought up at one time, you know, if you're bringing a sprayer or something down there. But I also seem to remember that legal counsel sort of said, you know, at some level that we may also not have a right to deny that person to use this as a right of way to get to their field. So has there been any more discussion about sort of the specifics with that kind of stuff or addressing any of those concerns?
Andrew, in the draft of the license agreement, one of the stipulations is that they're only allowed to transport harvest and planting equipment. I think it was a concern from Bobby originally that they're not driving grain trucks out there, which would be pretty abusive to that strip of land. We also have written into the draft agreement that this is only a 2-year agreement, which can be renewed, and we can also terminate it at any time. So if we go out the, you know, site is torn up or there's otherwise just negative impacts. It's relatively easy for us to say, we tried to, extend an olive branch, be a good neighbor, let this farmer access his field, but this is just too disruptive to this property.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Bridget.
Bridget and Lori, you cite another agreement in Ogden that was at 535. Who is that agreement? Is that our agreement? Some other entity, governmental entity has an agreement like that?
Well, it's with us. Whether or not it's one of those we inherited from CSX, I would need some help with.
It is one that we inherited, and I believe we have quite a few of these agreements in both St. Joe and in Ogden. I would have to double check, but I believe that one is with a private entity.
Okay, so let's just bring some consistency to costs that we already have.
Yeah, and one note is too, is if we're always basing this on the size of the property, it could always have a negative impact that it would almost encourage us to have more license agreements and potentially be more destructive on land as a revenue. It's like, oh, we could create revenue from having this huge easement, but really we don't want to do that.
Yeah.
That's not our mission.
Agreed. Okay, other discussion, question? If not, maybe we have a roll call vote, please.
Livesey,
Yes.
Hayes,
Yes.
Goodman,
Yes.
Cairns is yes.
Okay, next item on our agenda is Resolution 2022-05, our housing policy. May I have a motion?
I move we approve resolution 2022-05 pertaining to the district's housing policy.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Maybe we have discussion and commentary, please.
This is Sarah. I just, when I went through this, one thing I didn't see was any monetary consideration, and maybe that's a different document. So just tell me if that's the case. Maybe that needs to be in the direct agreement with the potential renter. But since we're modifying this to allow potentially non-staff housing, I just wondered if we should address a monetary situation, or is that a separate agreement?
Yes, sir, that's correct, that it would be addressed in the actual agreement between us and the person in the housing. And Darren and I met with Lorna Geiler to go over the implications of that and what that means if it's either a non-district employee or a district employee that we don't consider a resident guard as well.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Bill, could we, if staff wouldn't mind just giving us, I know that this policy is out of date, so that's the major reason for this, but are there other factors at play here that are sort of leading to this being addressed right now?
Sure, Andrew, it's very timely. We have a couple, we have some turnover in our site superintendent positions currently. Something that we've, been talking about could be upcoming for a while with these homes. And it's really to give us a higher degree of flexibility with our housing, and also whether that's seen as a, something that tempts higher level candidates, or perhaps could dissuade them, as we've had happen in the past, either because the houses may be in a place that does not work with their family situation, either due to a disability or some other issue, a school district issue, those types of things. We just want to make sure that we're able to bring in the highest quality candidates and make offers and not be too limited by a housing policy.
Okay.
Lori or Mike, so the resident guard responsibilities, that will go with whoever occupies the house, that it could be a non-superintendent, non-employed, that would we still want that responsibility?
That would be on a case-by-case basis. That's part of the flexibility we're looking for with this policy.
All right. Other questions from staff? I'm sorry, from the commissioners. Scott, are you okay with this agreement?
Yeah, I think it looks good. I've thought about this for a while. How do we make these kind of calls, and is that the employee that occupies the house kind of always required to be the resident guard, and vice versa? Is the employee that is the resident guard always required to stay in that house? And the answer to both of those questions is obviously no when I read this policy, but I actually wasn't aware of that one way or the other. I mean, the one I was most familiar with was Doug up at Sangamon River. And I always thought that was a really awesome house. So I don't know, it'd be interesting to see, if we can do other things with it and all that stuff. I mean, it's so yeah, I think this is great. And I mean, like Mike said, I think it appears to allow maximum flexibility between this resident guard and whether you're a resident of this home.
Yeah, I would
Right.
say whatever we can do to improve the flexibility and our ability to recruit the best employee. I think if this policy would help that, I'm certainly all in favor of it.
Yeah, it's a big benefit in terms of, if they're living rent free, then that's huge in terms of a salary consideration. So I don't know how that works together, if somebody's, but I guess you work that out individually. A person would pay rent if they weren't actually operating in a capacity of a district employee in the residency of the house. Like if they're not the resident guard, then they would presumably have to pay.
Right.
Okay.
So, Bill,
yeah.
just to clear, Bobby reached out earlier. Obviously she couldn't be here today due to
Right.
some travel issues, and she requested that she had some strong feelings about this one, and requested that we table this until next month, so that she could weigh in. And I normally would say let's vote because we're the four that are here, but I understand for her travel situation, sort of a little bit outside of her control, that I would feel comfortable with tabling this until next month. I also know that likely puts some strain on staff if they're in of trying to do job offers as part of the interview process. So I've her concern up and acknowledging that it's there.
Yeah, I think, Lori, go ahead. You had your hand up for a comment.
Yeah, well, Andrew mentioned the exact reason why this is an issue. We're in the interview process for site superintendent, and I am hoping that we could wrap that up well before the next board meeting. And I don't know, if we don't change the policy, I think that means we have to tell the person they have to live in the house. Is that true, Mike? And that could, as we've seen before, that could keep people from accepting the job offer.
And I think we've had that experience in the past where candidates have withdrawn interest because of that requirement. And Andrew, yeah, Bobby reached out to me as well on this issue and requested it. And yeah, I'm sensitive to wanting to withdraw it, but I also don't want the board necessarily to be an obstacle in our ability to hire someone at this critical time.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think this does bring up a bigger point, and we have discussed these kinds of things in the past, which is having 1 month to review policy changes like this with sort of an impending deadline on this. I don't feel like practice. And so I'm inclined to vote for this today, but I think that it's not good on us to do this in the future where we need to meet this deadline now for a policy change that I mean, this isn't something that we didn't know was happening. So this could have been done a few months ago, or at least floated and changes discussed.
One thing Bobby mentioned is that, the Urbana Park District, for instance, handles it a little differently than what we're proposing to do. And I guess right now I'm of the position that I would support going ahead and approving it now so we can continue with the recruitment process, but that we learn more about what the differences are between how Urbana handles it and how we're proposing, just so it can be something that we can get more information on and make a later determination on.
Dara, was that part of your research? I know that you prepared a table that compared different mechanisms.
Yeah, so we actually only pulled fellow conservation districts in that survey, Lori. But we did do a survey earlier in 2021, and we had 7 respondents, of our fellow conservation and forest preserve districts throughout the state. One of whom did not offer any sort of residential housing, so really only 6 players that mattered. But what we learned is that many of them do not require this of their site superintendents. They tend to have a lot more flexibility, and of the ones who do require it or allow it, the issue of how they handle rent and resident guard duties varies widely. So yeah, that's what those results showed.
Yeah, I'd say as far as like almost every forest preserve and conservation district handled it slightly different. Some of them more like how we handle it, some of them more like Urbana, but I'd hesitate to look to Urbana as our sole comparison for how we'd like to do it as well, since we are very different.
Sarah, Scott, do you?
Yeah, let me weigh in here, and I'm going to say, I appreciate, I respect Bobby a lot. And when Andrew first brought that up, which I had no idea, I didn't see that coming, Andrew, but I'm ready to just second, let's just table it, because I would always table it if one of the commissioners, wanted comments. However, after hearing the further discussion, and that we do need to move this forward, and it will affect our hiring. And I guess I was not aware that current policy would require a person to live there. And as much as I think that house is cool in terms of construction, it's also really awkward in terms of its location. And I could certainly respect somebody that didn't want to be there. And if that's what our policy requires, and if that's an issue for hiring a new site superintendent, I am going to say, let's pass this. I will vote for this tonight so we can move forward on that and not require that of the employee and allow that to move ahead. But also say, Bobby, I wish she would have clarified, because maybe we could amend it or something like that. But since she didn't choose to do that, I think we're in a situation where, I'm going to approve it. So I'm not going to support the motion to table.
May I offer, if this is approved this evening, we will probably learn some things during the negotiation that might encourage us to tweak this. Why don't we reevaluate after or during that process, and we can bring a revision to you if needed. Does that make everyone more comfortable?
And not vote on it tonight, Laura? Is that what you're proposing?
What I'm hoping is that you will approve it tonight so that we can move forward with our current recruitment.
Right.
It'll give us an opportunity to take another look at it, particularly as we do the negotiation. We might say, oh, well, that thing doesn't work. We need to change that. So we might need to bring some changes back.
Yeah. Sarah, your thoughts?
Yes. So I think for the sake of moving forward, we need to do this. And I think really the biggest thing, I think if we're going to offer a position to someone, it would be if they need to live in the house, they need to know that, right? Like that's huge. And so I think if we just take that off the table and agree to that at this point, if it's an option to them still, then it's an option. But I think as long as we remove the requirement off the table, then that would allow the staff to move forward with the offer. I think that's the biggest piece, right? And so, I'm fine with doing that. Do we know what was it requiring the residency, or did Bobby have an issue maybe with the new addition of non-district persons living in the house, or do we know what her exact issue was?
I believe it to be more in terms of the contract agreements and the consideration of rent versus benefit.
Right, it sounded as though she didn't think that there would still be a contract, but there would still be, some sort of license, so that, there would still be some sort of contract.
Let me quickly read her comment to me. It said, even with the changes, this way of doing business has been outdated for years. Most districts, and I'm referring to park districts, do a contract approved by the board. And said she thinks this would be in keeping with best practices, and said that the Urbana Park District at Meadowbrook is a rental contract. I'm personally really interested in us trying to allow the most flexibility we can in the recruitment and hiring process. And I'm guessing that if we approve this tonight as presented, that we can bring this back if necessary and make required changes. And Lori, you said that you may indeed learn more as you go through this process, which we could incorporate in any future changes to this. And then just a final, I think Andrew's comment that, something like this does require some considerable time for the board, at least to react to it and read it. So whatever time we can squeeze out of the system would be helpful. So we do have a motion.
Let me just ask one more question. I mean, is it the sense that the issue is like where you set the salary and if and how much you charge rent, and if a person turns down the housing benefit that is offered to them, I mean, I would, if it were me and I were on the employee side, I might say, well, since you would offer me a free house at that salary, I should get a higher salary or something. I mean, it seems that you'd get into that sort of space, which could be really awkward.
Well, Scott, one thing that we've found in looking at, there's been a lot of conversation about this over the decades, but it was made clear that there is a lot of responsibility that comes along with resident guard. People knocking on your door at all hours, asking for this, that, and the other thing. So you are working more. Right.
Yeah.
So in exchange, it was a previous determination or suggestion from our legal counsel that in exchange for that extra work, you just give them the residents. And I believe also there's a number of things that person needs to provide. Might correct me if this made it in the final draft, but things like all of the appliances they need to provide themselves. So they are making some temporary investments. It's not entirely free.
I mean, if we're hiring a site superintendent and somebody does need to knock on their door at 3 a.m. and they live in, I don't know, even where Mike lives or where I live, which is close by. I mean, what they don't have the option of knocking on the door. I mean, so it almost, if that's the issue, then maybe it is important that they live there, that they're available. So I don't know. Is that the sense, Lori? Am I reading too much into all this? I don't want to go into the personnel because that's not our role.
I think what I was trying to say was,
to set the policy.
I think the point I was trying to say is that anyone, no matter what position it is, if it's a resident guard, they have duties associated with that. So maybe it's a wash.
Yeah.
Papa.
Hello? Okay.
I'm ready to vote.
I think we're ready to vote. Yes. Oh, okay, Scott.
Sarah?
Here.
Yes.
Hey.
Yes.
Goodman?
Yes.
Cairns is yes.
Okay, motion has been approved. Thank you for the discussion on it. I'm sure we'll probably revisit this at a later time. Okay, we've dealt with museum collection issue for you. So I think we need a motion to move into executive session.
I move we go into executive session under Illinois Open Meetings Act 2C5, the purchase or lease of real property for the use of the public body, including meetings held for the purpose of discussing whether a particular parcel should be acquired.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Livesey,
Yes.
Hayes,
Yes.
Goodman,
Yes.
Cairns is yes.
Okay,
So I think we're going to ask Joey if he would leave us. Thanks, Joey.
I'll be
Thank you,
right back.
Joey.
Sure.
So